We study God's Word at music camp, and God commands us to sing to let His Word dwell in us richly in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. We're to worship Him musically. We're to proclaim His Word musically. And so we want to train up our students, our children, to be able to sing skillfully with music, to understand what they're doing. The Bible says sing with understanding. But it's all couched in studying God's Word, growing up as Christian worshipers.
The default in our culture today is to be a music consumer. We are conditioned by the age we live in and the technology we have to be people who listen to music, and it's an important part of our life. But we have lost something that our forefathers knew, which was being active participants in music. It used to be if you wanted music, you had to make the music. And now we just press a button. But these students are learning through the course of their time at music camp not to be music consumers, but to be active participants in making music. So not only to learn how to sing well, how to understand music as it's written on a page and how it comes together in a group environment, but to be able to take those experiences and have them be the seeds that are planted for their involvement their whole life in the musical life of the church. We want these students to be the next wave of worshipers in the church who know how to sing to God.
Hey y'all, welcome to CrossPolitic on the Fight Laugh Feast Network. Good to be with you. It's Friday. It's Friday. I feel like it needed to be Friday. Pastor Toby is still not in the studio, but we replaced him with Pastor Wiley. I mean, is that an upgrade or where?
Well, yeah, I think so.
All right, it's live. Chalk Knox and I'm the Water Boy.
But he's already on a show on the network, so it's not we can't trade. And I don't know if the Theology Podcast is willing to give up.
Chris, thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, glad to be here. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been a while. Too long.
Yeah.
Too long.
Yeah.
It's Friday.
You didn't do a wrap up, did you?
Well, I didn't do a wrap up. I'm not as skilled. Pastor Toby's wrap ups are pretty good.
Yeah.
I couldn't go there. So
no weekly wrap up. Sorry, guys.
Anyways, but we also have Professor Pearcey on to talk about the war. Her latest book. No one even knows it. It's coming out. Yeah. It's not even out yet.
The Toxic War on Masculinity.
Yeah, pretty excited to talk to her.
I've been waiting for this. I've been wanting to talk to her for a long time.
We have.
Yeah.
And I've reached out to her probably like 20 times, and finally.
Yeah, we're pretty low on the totem pole, but she gets around to us.
But first, fellas, ladies and gentlemen, it's Women's Month. That's what March is. Oh. And in honor of Women's Month, you should join the CrossPolitic Club membership. That was good. That was a good turn.
I want to ask Nancy about that. We'll ask her if women need a month.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, it's never been a better time in March to become a club member at CrossPolitic. This year, CrossPolitic will be dropping exclusive content in our club portal. We're actually upgrading our app for some of this that's coming. Some of this content will include Bible studies with Pastor Toby. He's got this great Bible series on Proverbs.
Wisdom for Kings.
A special with new St. Andrews president, Dr. Ben Merkel. Our Backstage content, which drops regularly, and our conference talks. And of course, you'll actually get a discount at our conference this year at the ARC Encounter.
Yeah.
And if you don't sign up for the club and you go to the conference, you're losing money. So you might as well join the club. So you can go to fightlaughfeast.com to join the club. Man, we are so glad to have Professor Nancy Pearcey on the show with us today. She's the best-selling author of Total Truth, The Soul of Science, Saving Leonardo, Finding Truth. Saving Leonardo was one of my friend's favorite books from Nancy. He's a public school teacher and actually loved it, and it really helped him out
Leonardo?
a lot. Leonardo. What did I say?
No, that just didn't. Go ahead.
Okay. It's Friday. Love Thy Body. And coming this June, the toxic war on masculinity, how Christianity reconciles the sexes. So, Professor Pearcey, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It sounds like it's going to be fun.
I know we're going to talk about toxic masculinity here, the war on masculinity, but I have to ask you, do women need a Women's Month?
For March?
I know that's out of left field, but I'm just wondering what your thought is on that.
I didn't even know that March was Women's Month.
Me either.
I don't have a quick answer to that one because it took me by surprise. I have no idea that there was a Women's Month.
Well,
There you go.
There we go.
Look,
So
breaking news on
The
CrossPolitic.
answer is no. I'll take that as a no.
Well, more or less, the presupposition is that every other time of the year is White Guy Month or
Yeah.
White Guy Day. That's kind of the operative sort of the,
I
sort
didn't
of the
sign up
operating
for that.
philosophy. But anyway, so I guess we could take like control of every other day,
Month or day,
that's right.
except for Black History Month and Women's Month.
and then maybe June or.
I want to know, before we get into her book, you discipled under Francis Schaeffer, who we love and read a lot of. We've been influenced by his thinking significantly. My dad was actually tutored by Rushdoony, and so there's all sorts of kind of connections. When my dad became a Christian under the Jesus Revolution during the 1960s and 70s, when my dad became a Christian, he kind of just immediately became reformed by the grace of God. He actually worked at a good bookstore that actually sold good books in California, which is how you.
I remember that. I remember that chain. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what was it like being discipled by Francis Schaeffer? And you were agnostic for the longest time.
Yeah, I went there as a non-Christian. And by the way, people sometimes ask me, why would you go to a Christian ministry if you were not a Christian? And the answer is actually that I had some family members who were just traveling through and stopped there for a weekend. I was studying in Germany. We had lived in Germany when I was a kid, so I'd gone back. And so when I had family members stopping at L'Abri, Francis Schaeffer's ministry in Switzerland, they said, hey, come down and see us. So I went down to see my family. I did not go in order to go to a Christian ministry. I had no interest in Christianity at the time. In fact, I the first time I went, I didn't even stay very long. I stayed a month. And a year and a half later, I went back and stayed then for 4 months. Wow. So it was two times. I was there twice because I was too stubborn the first time. I did not become a Christian the first time.
Okay.
But what was it like? Well, obviously it was incredibly influential on my life because it was because of my first visit to L'Abri that I eventually became a Christian and then went back in order to get, sort of grounded in my Christian understanding. So it had a huge influence on me because I had been raised in a Christian home, Lutheran. My dad's Swedish, my mom's Norwegian. So we're Scandinavian. But as you may know, in ethnic homes, it's kind of like all Irish or Catholic. In ethnic homes, sometimes there's not a lot of really personal commitment because people are relying on the ethnicity to hold you. And so when I started asking questions in high school, about halfway through high school, I just started wondering, why do we know Christianity is true? That was really my only question. How do we know it's true? And I spoke to my father, who was a university professor, and I said, point blank, just why are you a Christian? He said, works for me. I said, what? That's it? And I had a chance to talk to a seminary dean who actually was my uncle. And all he said was, don't worry, we all have doubts sometimes. And I thought, well, why don't you have any answers then for my doubts? So that was the quality of answers I got. And I realized, I decided, well, maybe Christianity just doesn't have any answers. And so I very intentionally walked away from my Christian faith and started on a search for truth. I decided it was up to me to figure out what was true. And that's how I got into philosophy, by the way. I started saying, well, who even talks about these things? If I can't get any of the adults in my life, maybe it's these dead white guys. After all, that's their job. As a philosopher, their job is to say, what is truth? How do we know it? Is there meaning to life? Is there a foundation for ethics? Or is it just true for me, true for you? And I very quickly realized that if there was no God, the answer was no to all of those things. There is no meaning to life. There is no truth. I thought, well, if all I have is my puny brain and the vast scope of time and history, then how could I think I would know some sort of absolute, objective, universal truth? Ridiculous. Yeah. And that's how I thought of it as a 16-year-old. So, clearly ridiculous. So by the time I went to L'Abri, I had absorbed all these secular isms, relativism, skepticism, determinism. So I was ripe. I was very ripe for the approach at L'Abri because it was an apologetics ministry. I don't think I would have become a Christian without apologetics.
Wow. So you kind of went on that journey, and then obviously, you've written a number of books down the road, and you come to your latest book, Toxic War on Masculinity. As a woman, why did you feel like you needed to write this book?
There were a couple reasons, and Chris Wiley will understand one of them, and that is I had written on the household historically, which which Chris has written on as well. In Total Truth, I had written on the role of the household historically, how men and women used to work together, on farms and in family industries, and how the Industrial Revolution sort of tore apart the family. It split the working relationship between husband and wife. It took the father out of the home. It left boys without a day-to-day model. And in Total Truth, I focused a little more on the impact on women and how this explains the feminist movement. But when I got around to thinking, I'd like to pursue this more. I wrote the foreword or the introduction to Chris's book on the household, and I thought I would like to revisit, but I would like to revisit this theme, but I don't want to do feminism. That's old hat now. The real issue before us today is men, and men are male bashing has become a common pastime today, and I was much more interested in explaining how the Industrial Revolution has had impact on men and how it contributed to the definition of men as toxic, so to speak.
I'm sorry, Pastor. I always give our guests the first right of refusal for questions and answers. Go ahead.
Your chapter in Total Truth is great on the household and really was helpful to me. I guess one of the things, as I think about this particular subject, Nancy, is like when I was a younger man, there was often a set of there were settings in which men were with men and would behave in certain ways, and then it was understood that when a woman came into the room, you would change your sort of your way of interacting with each other. Okay, there's a woman here, that's not an appropriate item for discussion right now. And often there would be older men who would kind of police the younger guys on that kind of stuff, and that's not necessarily the case today. Or at least I don't see it. Maybe outside of church settings. Have you thought about that at all, and how maybe how some developments here in our recent sort of social milieu have broken down these? Well, I guess the etiquette, the manners of young men, and they no longer. Well, I guess what I'm getting at is maybe there are some things that men do today that are toxic that in the past wouldn't have been. Wouldn't have found their way into mixed company, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I start my book with an interesting sociological study that was done as an ingenious experiment. Well, a sociologist went literally around the world. He went to countries all over the world, and he found out there were two competing scripts for men, for masculinity. He would say, he would ask young men two questions. He would start by saying, what does it mean to be a good man? If you hear a eulogy and someone says he was a good man, what does that mean? And the men had no trouble answering. They said honor, duty, integrity, sacrifice, do the right thing, stand up for the little guy. I thought that was cute. Stand up for the little guy, be generous, be a protector, be a provider. And he would say, well, where'd you learn that? And they would often say, well, it's the air we breathe. And in the West, they would say it's a Judeo-Christian heritage. Mm-hmm. And then he would say, okay, fine. What if I said, man up, be a real man? And they'd say, oh, no, that's completely different. That means be tough, never show weakness, win at all costs, suck it up, play through pain. And I thought this was funny. Be competitive. Get rich, get laid. Okay, that's their language. Sure. Get rich, get laid. And I thought, oh my, this is fascinating because men themselves feel the conflict between these two scripts for masculinity. On the one hand, they do hold the ideal of the good man, and I think that's what you're talking about, Chris. When men would police each other, especially in the presence of women, but men feel the social pressure to be the real man, as defined by secular standards. And what I found is that by starting with this, the two conflicting scripts for men, is it tended to disarm a lot of controversy. You guys will appreciate this. this has proved to be the most controversial book I've ever written. And
Sure.
that took me by surprise because Love Thy Body was about things like abortion, homosexuality, transgenderism.
Yeah.
I really thought that would be the most controversial. But no, in Christian circles, this has proved to be more controversial.
Oh,
And
that's interesting, Nancy. Let me stop you here at this point. In Christian circles, is this the controversial book? That's interesting. So, are you getting any pushback maybe outside of Christian circles on the book?
Well, of course, they don't know about it yet since it hasn't been published. So it's what I did is I taught it in classes. I taught the manuscript in classes. I had what I do with all my books is I have a lot of reading groups, which is really helpful because they help me find all the rough edges. It's very helpful. And then, of course, I have individual readers, expert reviewers, and so on. So when I talk about the controversy, I mean, it's been in Christian circles. So on the one hand, my young female students are all feminists, and they would get triggered whenever I said anything positive about men. Like I could say, men are strong, and they'd say, well, women are strong too.
Right.
And then, but men would also get triggered. I told my class I was writing a book on masculinity, and one male student shot back, "What masculinity? It's been beaten out of us." And what's a woman writing a book on this? Why is a woman writing a book on this anyway? So the response I tended to get was, "Whose side are you on? Whose side are you on? Are you going to bash men? Are you a feminist who's out to bash men, or are you sort of a super conservative who's going to defend men?" And as you know, because I presume maybe you've got the manuscript, I try to be objective and biblical. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to support the good man script against the secular real man script, and come up with as Christians we're in the world but not of it. We should be able to rise above the controversy and come up with a biblical position.
That brings me to I want to discuss with you what was kind of your biblical defense of kind of true masculinity.
Oh, interestingly enough, I have a lot of Bible passages, of course, but the thing that I found most persuasive was sheer biology. Biologically speaking, men have testosterone, which makes them stronger, larger, faster. Mm-hmm. It also tends to make them, on average, more aggressive.
I'm triggered. Oh, Nancy, how could you? Go ahead.
Makes them more aggressive and more risk-taking. And these things are good. We need to affirm them. This is how God made men. I did read, there's a book out that was the first cross-cultural analysis of concepts of masculinity, done by an anthropologist. So he went around the world to several different cultures looking at what is their view of masculinity. And he found all cultures expect the good man to do three things, the 3 Ps, he calls them: provide, protect, and procreate, meaning become fathers. Mm-hmm. So this is universal. Mm-hmm. Because men are made in God's image, even men who are not explicitly Christian understand what the good man is. Mm-hmm. They understand that their strengths are not given them to do whatever they want, but to provide and protect and take care of those that they love.
So this is kind of maybe more of an apologetic question then. You basically kind of just talked about natural revelation of masculinity, kind of drawing from natural revelation on masculinity. How does that answer kind of the transgender, world where our biology doesn't really mean much about who we are? Does that?
Yeah, because right now a lot of people are just throwing that out the door and saying biology can mean whatever we want it to mean. Man can get pregnant too, right? Right. So then when we're talking biology, we're talking about sex, we're talking about two different things. How are you communicating to someone that, and it seems like even with the pushback that are coming, when you say you're getting pushback from Christians, I'm like, we're doomed.
Yeah, exactly.
If the Christians are having a hard time being able to identify masculinity and manhood, and the natural general revelation is marred so much by sin, how are you communicating the realities of this truth, but even biologically?
Yeah.
Well, fortunately, I already wrote "Love Thy Body,"
Yeah.
which deals exactly with that question, which deals exactly with how transgenderism separates the person from the body. I mean, transgender activists argue explicitly that your gender identity has nothing to do with your biological identity. There's a BBC documentary that says at the core of the debate is the idea that your mind can be at war with your body, at war, and it's of course it's the mind that wins. Or another BBC video was put out for teenagers, and it featured a young woman who was clearly a woman, but she identified as non-binary. And she says literally, this is a quote, "It doesn't matter what meat skeleton you've been born in, it's your feelings that define you." So ever since that what you're talking about is an extremely important question, but I deal with that much more in Love Thy Body, because there I talk about the importance of the body as part of our identity, because Christians have lost that too. I mean, Christians with their sacred secular split often don't have a high view of the body. As one of my students once put it, growing up in the church, I was always taught spirit good, body bad.
Yep.
Yeah, well, of course, that's Gnosticism, Nancy, and that's been
exactly.
Pernicious.
Exactly. So in some ways, we need to go back and recover our own heritage, because the Christian church, the early Christian church, had to stand against Gnosticism and Platonism and Manichaeism and all those other ancient isms that all denigrated the body. So we need to recover the biblical view that the body is part of God's handiwork and part of our true identity.
Yeah, and then that gets to the question of how did we come to be as we are? If you're a Darwinist, it's just simply kind of agonistics. It's just basically kind of the struggle to survive, and this is just kind of the outcome. There's no implicit design. There's no good that's being served. So when God says at the end of the days in creation, good, and then very good. Gnostics don't agree, and generally speaking, materialists don't agree either. Mm-hmm. Good is a moral judgment, and if your entire approach to the natural world is amoral, then there is a sense in which you're not looking for purpose in things any longer, except in a just kind of rudimentary way. This is the way this particular crustacean survives, that kind of thing. But that's not a moral good. That's just a kind of an instrumental good for survival. But when we're thinking about the body as Christians, we can't separate purpose from goodness. Right. And then this tendency that we have to locate goodness exclusively in the spirit, as over against the body, actually lends itself to this problem that we're dealing with. Gnosticism actually is very at home in the modern world. I think it's almost it was almost inevitable that it'd come back. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and I agree with you. Modern materialism denigrates the body in the same way by saying that nature has no telos, no teleology, no purpose. It's just a product of blind material forces. And the logical conclusion is if your body is a product of purposeless forces, it has no intrinsic purpose that we are morally obligated to respect. There is as Richard Dawkins put it, there was no good, no evil, no purpose, no design, just blind, pitiless indifference. Yeah, right. Is one of his
except for that statement.
Except for that statement, exactly.
Go ahead.
There's also a well-known feminist and lesbian whose name is Camille Paglia.
Oh yeah,
I figured but she has a phenomenal quote where she says, the reason a lot of Christians read her is because she is a bit of an iconoclastic feminist. She does not believe that sex is a product of it's just a social convention or a social construct. She says, no, nature made us male and female. But then you say, well, in that case, how do you defend being a lesbian? And here's how she puts it. She said, nature made us male and female, but why not defy nature? After all, and this is a direct quote, fate, not God, has given us this flesh. We have absolute claim to our bodies and may do with them as we see fit. So it's exactly what Chris was saying. Modern materialism is Gnostic in the sense that it says the logic is if our bodies are products of mindless material forces, purposeless forces, then they have no intrinsic purpose. They give us no clue to our identity. They give us no moral message. We may do with them as we see fit. So I agree with you. To really counter transgenderism and homosexuality as well, we have to go back to the science, because it's Darwin really that left us with this view that nature has no teleology, it has no purpose. And of course, science is on our side here, because it's quite clear that living things are structured for a purpose, that on a very fundamental level, that ears are made for hearing and eyes are made for seeing, wings are made for flying, fins are made for swimming. The entire development of the organism is driven by an inbuilt plan or blueprint, which is DNA. So science itself tells us that nature is designed for a plan, a purpose, a goal. And what Christians are saying is when we live in harmony with that purpose, we will be happier and healthier.
You know, I look back at the abortion fight that we had, and I'm concerned about that, because I want to believe you. I think that let me first say, I believe there is a brick wall of reality that everybody's going to run into. Like, you can't avoid it. That's unavoidable. But going back and watching the argumentation and the process, we thought that we knew the science was on our side even then too. But I don't think we expected them to swallow the reductio so hard. So that when we made the arguments of reality and the facts about us, a human being in the womb, we just thought if we can get them to admit that we would then win the war. But then they admitted it, and they just said, "Who cares?" It's
Well, what the intellectuals did, what the secular bioethicists did. Peter Singer at Princeton, a bioethicist at Princeton, pretty much led the way. What he did is he said, well, there's a distinction between being human and being a person. So he acknowledged that the fetus is human, meaning it's a member of the human race, it's a member of the human species, it's biologically, chromosomally human. But then he literally argues that being human has no moral standing and does not deserve any legal protection. It only deserves legal protection when it becomes a person at some later point. Well, of course, every bioethicist out there defines personhood differently. Once you separate it from being biologically human, where do you draw the line? So Peter Singer would say things like self-awareness, autonomy, an ability to plan for the future, even things like that. But every bioethicist has a slightly different list. And so it's subjective, it's arbitrary, but that explains how their strategy, they lost, as you put it, they lost the case on the scientific level. And most secular bioethicists now agree life begins at conception. I don't know of any major secular bioethicist who denies that life begins at conception. But then they say, but personhood, that comes in later. And depending on the person, Peter said, some of them say before birth. Some of them say it does not become a person until after birth.
Right.
For both Crick and Watson, Francis Crick, the two discoverers of the DNA structure, Crick and Watson, who are kind of household names, both of them suggested allowing the child to live for 3 days after birth, so you could do genetic testing on it, and only if it passes the test do you qualify it as a person and allow it to live.
Wow.
Peter Singer himself said,
a Presbyterian.
3 years of age is even a gray area, because how much cognitive functioning does a toddler have? So that's where we are right now, where personhood is what counts. Being human has no moral standing, no legal protection. Being human is no longer enough for human rights.
Yeah. So what do you think is driving this, Nancy? So, it's clear that these are people who are trying to push back the boundaries to sort of open up, our sort of moral culture to practices that have been historically condemned, infanticide, euthanasia, so forth.
Eugenics.
Eugenics. What's driving this, do you think, at a motivational level?
Oh, that's a good question, because, what I do is I read the experts and help Christians understand what the secular bioethicists are saying. If you want to get down to the deeper level, then you're probably getting into the spiritual realm.
Right.
Where, but I would like to also say, though, that people believe what they're told. There was an article by a woman who converted to Catholicism. Jennifer Fulwiler is her name, but didn't become pro-life right away. It took several years before she became pro-life, even after she became Catholic. And she says, it's because of what I was taught. In sex education classes in public schools, I was taught that sex is for fun and bonding and had nothing to do with childbirth. I mean, I was kind of surprised by this. Surely not. But she said it was totally disconnected from having kids, to the point when I thought if a woman became pregnant, that was akin to being struck by lightning. And I thought, well, that's not fair. For a woman to have to put up with a pregnancy that she didn't want. And she said, it was very revealing of the mentality. In fact, she said, even after I became a Christian, she said, my husband and I sat down with a marriage, a series of videos on marriage put out by a non-denominational group. And she said, even in the Christian series of videos, when they got to sex, they talked about bonding and back rubs and staying in shape and using contraception, but they never talked about children. Wow. Wait a minute, what is sex for?
Right.
So you also have to realize that people, when they're raised this way, they believe what they're taught. So a lot of what we have to do as Christians is just help them, not assume necessarily that there's some nefarious motives. It just, people sometimes sincerely just believe the secular worldview that they've been taught.
Nancy, do you have 5 more minutes to hang around?
Sure.
Oh, awesome.
Sure, because we haven't talked about masculinity much.
No, that's what I want to get to next. I kind of want to get into how, why masculinity is under attack, particularly white
This
men.
conversation just goes all over the place.
It does,
yeah,
but it's all connected. So hold on real quick. You got an ad read. So I got to let you know. Now listen, Pastor, James White holds the championship medal on ad reads.
James White, am I?
So everybody this week so far has failed.
It's March Madness, and so we're kind of,
James White is the champ right now. So when you read this ad, that's who you competing against. Just so
all right.
You know.
So this is for Gravity Jack.
Yes, correct.
Gravity Jack is a full-service digital agency specializing in the development of virtual and augmented reality experiences.
This is rubbing C.R. Wiley wrong already. He's like self-driving cars.
Mobile apps, blockchain, and Web3 projects. Founded in 2009 as the first American agency to offer augmented reality. They even patented it. Gravity Jack's digital experiences have been a source of innovation for small businesses, Fortune 500 companies, and the U.S. military. Get your vision in motion at gravityjack.com.
He's got a voice for this stuff.
You know what? I think you might have just won on just voice alone. So, all right, we're going to continue to talk to Nancy Pearcey, The Toxic War on Masculinity. Go get it.
Coming out in June.
Make sure they have to already go and do a print as soon as it starts. Yep. More with Nancy Pearcey in the paywall. If you're single, get married. If you're married, have kids. And if you have kids, go baptize them. Until Monday, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast. This is CrossPolitic.
Home. It's where you build your legacy, where traditions are started, seeds are planted, meals are shared, and stories are told. We are Chris and Natalie Carpenter, owners of Story Real Estate, and our team of top agents helps people find homes in Moscow, Idaho, and around the country.
Have you thought about a move? Contact us to get connected with a top agent who shares your values and puts your family first. Or reach out to us about our Moscow relocation guide.
Wherever you're looking to go, we can help you find home. Call us at Story Real Estate or visit us at storyrealestate.com and start building your legacy.
Free men need to be able to protect their families. It's really sad to see people hurt, livelihoods destroyed, even homes destroyed, just to make a political point. Free men take action when churches face heartbreaking attacks. And while cowards stand idle, free men run towards the sound of gunshots when children are in danger. I'm so thankful for free men who stand ready with the tools of liberty.